Hello everyone, I hope your semester is going well. I'm Stephen Braden and today I'm going to discuss Chapter 18 of Michael Bazzell's book, Open Source Intelligence Techniques. This chapter covers online mapping. This is for the course CJ872, Open Source Information Analysis. Let's just get right into it. Online mapping falls into what we call geospatial intelligence, or GeoInt as it is sometimes called. Geospatial intelligence is kind of in its renaissance. A lot of GeoInt started as being embraced by the hard science community, such as geologists, and slowly crept to the social sciences. And now it is being used on a daily basis by thousands, if not millions, of people. Geospatial intelligence is very useful because you can create fake pictures and fake businesses and whatnot, but you cannot obfuscate physical space on Earth. There have been attempts to edit things out of maps, but that often just creates more curiosity to location, and every location in the United States is cataloged and belongs to someone. Listed below are a bunch of mapping programs, applications, and websites. If you do not know all of these, do not worry. After all, this tutorial is not designed to make you an expert in online mapping. That would take years. But I assume most of you are familiar with some of these applications. On the user-friendly side of these applications, you have Google Earth, Google Maps, and Bing Maps. On the more expert side, there are programs such as ArcGIS and QGIS. What this presentation is going to center on is Google Maps, Google Earth, and data generated from ArcGIS and QGIS that is available online. So let's have some fun and be prepared to see some great visuals. We are talking about mapping, so visuals are a must. The first thing we are going to talk about is Google Earth. It used to be to see a representation of the Earth, you were limited to either globes or atlases, a type of map. Now we can just pull up Google Earth. I want to talk about a project I did where I really needed Google Earth. Willy Brandt, who was the head of state for West Germany at one point, led a commission to study economics and found that you can divide the world into global north and global south, and there is a gap in terms of development and prosperity. Sadly, this was the graphic he used to represent this. Yes, a multi-state commission, and this was the best graphic they could come up with. I wanted to know if there was a pattern when it comes to human trafficking. My main point was to see if the human trafficking situation was worse in Global South. This is not that presentation, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but the United States recognizes 186 countries. Some of these countries are very easily identified as countries in the north and south. Iceland, over here, is readily recognizable as being in the region of Global North, and South Africa is clearly in the Global South. But some regions, such as the Balkans and the Caucasus Mountain region, are very hard to identify. Does anyone recognize this region over here? I'll give you a few seconds to think. This is the Caucasus Mountain region. I apologize for the cluttered screen here. Those borders are very irregular because of the fact that it is a mountainous region, and the borders probably correspond to valleys. Here was the infamous Brandt line I had to work with on the right, and on the left is a snippet of the section from that map. This was giving me a very hard time. Think of how difficult it would be if I had only a small globe to use. I do not think I could do the project without Google Earth or something similar. Google Earth and Google Maps is becoming so efficient that many law enforcement agencies are using it, and they are using it in some very interesting ways. Obtaining an API key in crime mapping, from the article Using Google Maps to Track Down Suspects in a Criminal Investigation. The article mentions agencies using Google Earth to identify areas that have cameras and to see if those cameras captured footage of suspects. This helped them zero in on what one researcher called distance decay. Now, this is the principle of distance decay. Individuals' routine activities such as social interactions, work, or school tend to cluster around that individual's home location or some other anchor point, such as a workplace. When investigating an offender's journey to crime, it is therefore important to take distance decay into account, as studies show that offenders often commit crimes in the near vicinity of their home location. Here's a practical example of using Google Maps to locate a camera. I just picked an intersection near my home and started to use the zoom function to zero in on businesses that might have a camera, and wouldn't you know it, here we see an Almo's restaurant at 499 Owendale, Ypsilanti, Michigan, 48197 with a security camera on it. Let me just give you a second to locate it, see if you can figure it out. It's right here. to the top right is a more zoomed in snippet. Right there is a camera. Now we do not know what the state of the camera is. It may very well not be hooked up to anything. I also include a snippet of the time cataloging function of Google Maps. When you are using Google Maps, some of you may notice in the upper left-hand corner where an address is displayed that there is a clock-looking icon. This tells you when the last time a location was photographed and allows you to search past images. Let's do a quick example. I would honestly have never thought to use Google Maps in this fashion. Okay, so I've set my anchor point right here. I'm just going to change the view. Okay, there's the restaurant. And I'm searching for the camera. I also see another camera over here. It's interesting, but I never thought of this capacity until I did this presentation. Surveillance systems in cities are a hot-button issue, as they should be. Many serious scholars are debating whether or not these mass surveillance systems are causing a chill on the exercise of civil rights. Other critics have voiced concern that federal grant money is going to surveillance and not the acquisition of more police officers. One point that people from all backgrounds seem to be concerned about is cost. In the city of Philadelphia alone, a system is being installed, or maybe as of right now is already installed, that costs $17 million. For the Pentagon, that does not seem like much, but for a city, that is quite a lot. Google Maps and Google Earth provide a way for researchers to know what areas the cameras will cover before they are installed. You notice how I bold and underline the sentence "before cameras are installed." I imagine a few of you have seen places that have very poor camera implementation, to the point that you wonder why they even install the cameras. Not only is it a waste of money, but it can be more difficult to work around a badly implemented system than to just start from scratch. When we see a trend, such as the mass utilization of a tool, it's necessary to ask why we see that trend. The reasons why Google Earth and Google Maps are being embraced is 1. Some nations are impoverished. In one article I read, researchers in Guyana use Google Maps to create hotspots. As soon as a crime is reported in the media, people can use that online application to determine where the crime occurred. This is useful if you do not have a reliable law enforcement agency in the area. It's user-friendly. Some of the software applications created to generate hotspots or do temporal analysis to predict crime are difficult to use. Geographic information systems, often abbreviated GIS, can be extremely complicated for new users. I had an entire class in GIS and still have difficulty using it. Or some programs require so many incidences to catalog before generation of information that the people studying crime patterns already see the pattern before it gets to enough incidences, so they don't need the data from the software. Rigel in particular is being used less and less for such reasons. And lastly, it's cheap. Agencies have budgets. ESRI ArcGIS costs money. Depending on the package, a pro-grade program can cost anything from $700 to $3,800 a year, according to their website. It has a lot of useful features, but it also has some features that you may not use for quite some time. During my research, I came across this wonderful quote that I'm going to use to end this section. Open data is information that is freely available for anyone to use and share with others. Before I transition into talking about GIS and QGIS, I want to mention 2 other online mapping sources. The reason I want to mention these are because of how popular they are. And then I will conclude with information on some great but obscure methods of getting geospatial intelligence that may not be considered online mapping, but will be of use to you. The first thing we are going to discuss is Bing Maps. Bing Maps is hugely popular due to ease of use and relative low cost. I use the term low cost often rather than free, but I myself have never had to pay for any service I use through Bing Maps or Google Maps. Bing Maps is praised for its crisp imagery, and I'm new to using Bing Maps. In fact, I've rarely looked at it until doing this report. But from that perspective, I grant you the imagery is beautiful. This right here is a picture of the Breslin Student Event Center. For some strange reason, this location was on my mind. The bird's eye feature is a wonderful feature. For those of you who have not used this feature, or for that matter, never used Bing Maps, bird's eye view utilizes oblique imagery. This is images taken at an angle. Bird eye view is 45 degrees. Oftentimes, top-down satellite imagery does not tell you much about a location. On this slide, we can see the difference between the 2 images. Maybe you could have guessed what you were looking at in the top-down view, but from the bird's eye setting, it is readily apparent that what we are seeing is a trailer park. If you don't have an oblique image, you may have to try to guess by shadow what an object is. Just looking at the literature, I can see that there's a lot less material on agencies using Bing Maps for crime mapping. The other big one that we are going to discuss is Zelo. Being that this is a master's program, and some of the students here are older and professionals, I imagine a few of you have actually become homeowners yourselves, and may even have used Zelo. Here's a screenshot of Zelo for an address that I lived at. It is off the market now. How can this be useful? The answer is for a lot of things. The tax and sale record could aim someone in an investigation. If someone has a reported income of only $30,000 a year, and yet the value of their home is $1 million, that could be a sign of corrupt practices. This is how some mafia people were actually prosecuted. Okay, the least entertaining portion of my presentation, the assessor's office. Your city and county's office for all things that are tax related. Information from the assessor's office can often be attained online and usually for free. The things that you are going to find useful are, number one, you can find out about the land and its parcel number. Any piece of land in Michigan has an assigned parcel number. It is a unique identifier for that geological location. The second most useful thing you will find is the owner. The owner does not always have to be a person. In fact, could be a company. Oftentimes an LLC is created to obtain land. The value can also be important for reasons I previously stated. Tax information can be useful if you are a tycoon. Some property is seized because taxes have not been paid, and you can actually buy some properties by just paying the taxes owed. At this point, I am going to give a quick preamble about the websites. I'm going to include the links in the descriptions of the videos so you can do these practicals, but all the sites I'm going to show you are preloaded already. There are two reasons why I've done this. The first is because these pages take time to load, especially the GIS data page. The video would be needlessly long if we did that. The second reason is that the demo gods, as we call them in tech, don't like me, and sometimes, usually only when I'm doing a tutorial video, I will have trouble with websites loading. Either they take way too long, or I think the results of the search will open a new tab and suddenly they do not, or vice versa. First, we go to the land portal search and enter the address. We see only one result. This is where I live. Click on that, and it brings up all this nice rich data here. Okay, so we see a picture of the property. We can actually also see the floor plan. I don't think I need to tell you exactly why that could be valuable. If it's a tactical situation. A bunch of other information here is going to be boring stuff if you are not a homeowner, and if you are a homeowner, this is probably still boring information. But at the end of the presentation, we are going to spice things up. Things to note are that often the online portals are serviced by a company called BSNA Software. It's a company located in Michigan itself. Some portals give you the option to see the location on the map. As you can see, this one does as well. Got that function right here. Now we will talk about ArcGIS and QGIS. ESRI is the software company that created and maintains ArcGIS. It is one of the greatest geospatial information systems in the world for a variety of uses. GIS systems were initially used by geologists and geographers. From there, it started to be used by social scientists who were interested in things like demographics and migration patterns of both people and animals. And now academics use it when they can only research a place remotely. Through the years, ArcGIS has had so many features added onto it that it is no longer the simple map generation tool. From geologists to anthropologists to detectives and epidemiologists, there are a variety of ArcGIS products out there, from the person who just wants to do some research from their computer to professionals working on grant-funded projects, such as projects to help them determine how waste can best be disposed of. ArcGIS gives a lot of options for both the professional cartographer and the professional geographer. In the world of crime mapping, ArcGIS is utilized for hotspot and temporal analysis. For those of you who are not familiar with temporal analysis, That means changes over time. It was a huge deal when temporal analysis first became a thing. ArcGIS is not open source in any sense of the word. But ArcGIS is used by cities and counties for a variety of reasons. If you live in a large county, I mean large as in one of the most populous in the state, your county probably uses it often, and the data is provided to the public online usually. QGIS is the open source GIS package. When I say open source, it's important to note that I mean it is open source in terms of software, not intelligence. That means it is non-proprietary, it is free, and has been used by some departments in the same capacity that ArcGIS is used. Here I will go through a practical. I noticed these two ads posted that could possibly be a trafficking situation. The phone numbers have been redacted, but they were different phone numbers. But just look at these ads for a couple of minutes and tell me if you see any similarities. I want you to note the dates posted are February 2016 and March 2017. So maybe this is not just a random incident, but rather a network operation. Let's see if I can use publicly available data to see if there is any name or business that ties these two locations together. So our first step is to pull up the ArcGIS data from the county. First address we are going to search for is going to be 1035 Madison Street. Once you have done your search, you're going to really want to use your zoom function. It'll make your life a lot easier when you're trying to click on a location. Once we get in, we can be more precise. And remember, we're looking for 1035. Okay, here it is. Now we click on 1035 and look what happens. Okay, so we find out that this belongs to someone named Carter. And now we're going to click this link right here. This is going to be where our wealth of information comes from. Detailed parcel info. Again, we see the owner name. We see that this building is zoned as residential, so an enterprise should probably not be ran out of this location no matter what. I did try to get a zoning infraction against them, but cannot get City Hall to put any weight behind it. I'm going to scroll down to get the sales history. Okay, this is the sales history right here. This can be very useful. Here we see Carter bought this land from Great Arbor Properties, who owned it from December 20th, 2012 to July 11th, 2018. Now we are going to do a search for the 1392 Holmes Road. Okay, so I've already basically loaded everything here. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to click on this. We see right away, owned by Great Arbor Properties. Again, we get the parcel number. And now, as before, we're going to go to detailed parcel information. So with the fact that it's still owned by Great Arbor Properties, it might be tempting to think we have a smoking gun connecting these two properties and the operation. But how long has Great Arbor Properties owned this parcel? For us to consider the operations link, they would have had to have owned the property in 2017. Again, we want detailed parcel information. And let's go down here to the sales history. And we see that Great Arbor Properties has owned this parcel since February 22nd, 2013. I want to take a second and make it clear that I'm not in any way saying that Great Arbor Properties is in any way doing anything untoward, but there could be business practices that make using these properties and this company especially appealing to underworld figures. Two possible things come to mind. Perhaps they accept payments in cash, and maybe they allow for month-to-month living rather than a lease agreement. That is not so uncommon out here in Ypsilanti, and both of those things are going to make a site more appealing for antisocial enterprises. These are the sources I've used in this writing. The sources will be in the description. You will notice I, of course, have to mention Michael Bazzell's book, as it was mentioned at the beginning. It is a great resource for all things open source intelligence. I am super psyched to see everybody else's presentation, and I hope you enjoy.